Tick, 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 tick. Tick, tick, tick.
Stop.
Breaking news this afternoon, Rodney Reed will not be executed next week.
Reed won't be executed next Wednesday as planned. He was convicted of killing Tracey Stites in Bastrop, and that happened more than 20 years ago.
Did you murder Tracey Stites?
No, I didn't. That's right. By order of the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals, Rodney Reed's execution has been stayed.
There's a new lead story here, and that is, what the fuck is he wearing right now? If Francis came out with his own fashion line, I think it should be called, I Just Lost a Bet. Anyway, this is terrible. But before we get into what Francis thinks about Rodney Reed, we saved him! Guys, the campaign worked. 3 million voices were heard and justice was served. I find it particularly idiotic that these people obsess and center their lives around the concept of justice. So they're really good people, they want things to be fair and righteous, and if there is an injustice in the world, they want to correct that with their noble behavior, their activism. And yet, think how off track you would have to be to set Rodney Reed free. The more I've researched this man, the more I have discovered just what a monster he actually is. And I got news for you people, the Tracey Stites case, the fact that he raped and murdered that woman, is the tip of the iceberg when it comes to this dude. Because these people are so deluded, all that they have achieved is a 3-month reprieve from him being executed. That does not mean A, he's not getting executed, B, he's not going to stay in jail for the rest of his life. They actually think they're going to set this man free, and we're going to get the book tour and all of it. He's going to get the interview with Essence magazine, and he's probably going to get a BET award for Best Murder of a White Woman this year. I don't know. It's a competitive field. So there's a few things I want to explain to you. I've been digging around, and I've found new stuff that is highly relevant to this case, and just to the man. So I want you to see who they are hyping up, who they are going out of their way to try to save. I'm telling you, what we are seeing is the impact, the power of collected stupidity. One stupid person acting alone, they can only do so much. When you have millions of them together, it is like a stupid bull in a china shop. And the people who made the decision to review this case and to not kill this man, they caved under the pressure. The pressure was coming from just thousands and thousands of people. We're talking emails, phone calls, protests, letters, everything. It was a deluge of bitching. And human beings are not meant to be able to withstand that much energy. And they cracked under the pressure. Because where was the other side of this story? I mean, was Tracey Stites' family calling the Texas Parole Board and all that? No. And this happened 20 years ago. This woman was not famous. You know who is famous? Rodney Reed. He's newly famous. He's famous for all the wrong reasons. But we've seen it many times. People leverage their fame. You can monetize fame, and in this case, you can get out of jail free. I mean, that's what they're pushing for. The problem is, Rodney Reed has raped other women. And so, do you remember, by the way, this is interesting, this is fun. Remember when Dr. Phil brought up the other cases that Rodney Reed was linked to? Because this dude is dirty and has been dirty for years. He's been raping and beating women for a long time. But Dr. Phil dismissed it as, oh, well, you were never convicted of those ones, were you? Listen to this.
Tracey's sister's position is that Rodney has a violent past, yet he was never convicted of any other charges, nor was he indicted on what she said he was indicted on.
Okay, so Dr. Phil is either evil or ignorant. It's one of those two things. But the reason he wasn't indicted and convicted on the other accusations was not because they didn't have evidence that he did it. It's quite the opposite. They are absolute slam dunk, he definitely raped these women cases. The reason is because he was already going to jail and on trial and found guilty of the rape and murder of Tracey Stites, which put him on death row. So trying him for another rape case would be a bit redundant now, wouldn't it? It wouldn't make sense. Why put the victims through that? And I don't even think that's how the legal system works. If a man is on death row, you're not going to bring up other charges, even if they're serious charges. So I need to explain this to you. Rodney Reed is guaranteed to have raped at least 2 other women. He's charged with 7 of them. I mean, but I mentioned the 2 in particular because everyone has a boner for DNA evidence. And those ones, he has a ton of DNA evidence. I mean, he did rape his wife, or at least the mother of his children, a white woman. He raped her, quote, all the time. One time he raped her in front of his children. But that one's a little bit fuzzy. You know, you can kind of wiggle out of that because she consented some of the time. So, yeah, kind of a gray area. Let's avoid that one. Let's go to the simple one. How about the one where he raped a 12-year-old?
8-year-old.
So,
dude.
for all the do-gooders and for all the white guilt brigade who think that this guy is about to bounce out of prison and live happily ever after, I got news for you. If that were to happen, which would be an abortion of justice, he's going right back to jail on 2 rock-solid rape cases. They found his semen in the rape victims. Now, when they took the rape kit and they swabbed up in there, they had the rapist's semen. It's just, it matched nobody. They didn't have this dude's DNA on file. Until Rodney kept raping. Because this is what a dude with an 85 IQ does. Not all, but he's not a bright dude. And he raped one too many, and now his DNA was on file, and they tested it against every other case, unsolved rape cases in Bastrop, and guess what? It was all Rodney Reed. Because Bastrop is a small town. Do you know how small? Well, today it has around 8,000 people. Back in the day, in '96, it had just over 6,000 people. 6,000 people? I've seen 6,000 people in line at a Trader Joe's in Brooklyn. So, out of that, I mean, we're talking about a Texas town. It's mostly white people. So, if someone says, I was raped by a young black male, the police chief is like, okay, was it Rodney or Jamar? Or Jamar, is that a name? I wouldn't put it past him. It's like one of 2 guys, and it's always Rodney. Rodney, will you please stop raping our women? Thank you. Anyway, let's dive in, because I've done some research. I've actually tried. It's weird when I try to make a video and it turns out like amazing, like even by my standards. It's crazy. It almost scares me, and it almost makes me want to try on every video. But then that passes, and I just phone it in.
I want to go back to how you have interviewed many people who have been accused of wrongdoing, some people who have been accused of doing some very, very bad things. Even before you started your show, you've had a background when it comes to CSI. You said that Rodney Reed is being truthful in his comments. Are you stopping short, though, and saying Rodney Reed is innocent?
Well, that's not the question here. The question here is this, and look, do I have a crystal ball? No, I don't. I do not believe that he killed this woman. I can tell you that from my clinical background, from my forensic psychology background. I can tell you that I do not see indications that scientifically, medically, or in talking to this man, that he is the perpetrator here.
Oh, great, Phil. You took time out of your facelift schedule to clinically and scientifically analyze. You looked deep into his soul, and you got that Texas gut feeling that George W. used to get. Yeah, I don't think he did it. He told me he didn't do it, and he didn't break eye contact, so smack the gavel, case closed.
When I sat down with Rodney, I asked point blank about his past sexual assault allegations. Here's what he had to say. Now, do you have any idea why they zeroed in on you to begin with? Because they had to test that DNA against yours in order to know it was you. Why you?
There was other allegations before in my past. That was not true, because I didn't do any of that.
What were the allegations in the past?
Assault cases.
The assault cases that they have brought up about you in the past were that you have assaulted other females, and they brought some of those to court, right?
Yes, they did.
To make those allegations, including accusing you of raping a 12-year-old girl.
They were accusing me of all that stuff.
Did you ever rape a 12-year-old girl?
No, I didn't.
Whoa. I didn't even, that's weird. I might change my mind real time here, guys. Because did you hear the way he answered that? He said no before Phil had finished the accusation. That's powerful. That's undeniable. Because I'm thinking, damn, that's a confident dude. Like if you said, Devon, what's 2 + 2? 4. That's a guy who knows what 2 + 2 is, like, there's no doubt. This man did not rape a 12-year-old girl.
8-year-old.
The only problem with that, Rodney, it's a great story. I mean, I think we can all agree none of us have raped a 12-year-old girl yet,
8-year-old,
right?
dude.
We're all part of that club. Why is your semen in that 12-year-old girl? Why did she go to the hospital, say, I just got raped, and then they found your semen in her? Rodney, who did that? Was that LAPD? Was that some sort of a white conspiracy? Was that Jeffrey Epstein? Who did that to you, Rodney? Let me give you the testimony. Let me give you a little breakdown as to what happened to that 12-year-old girl.
8-year-old.
And by the way, Tamir Rice, you guessed it, was 12.
8.
They referred to this young girl as AW. Next was AW, a 12-year-old girl who was home alone, kind of like Macaulay Culkin. But Macaulay Culkin was not anally raped. Having fallen asleep on a couch after watching TV, AW awoke when someone began pushing her face into the couch and had blindfolded and gagged her. She was repeatedly hit in the head, called vulgar names, and orally, vaginally, and anally raped. The foreign DNA from AW's rape kit was compared to Reed. Reed was found not excluded. That's a very charming way of phrasing it. So scientific. You know, you don't want to be alarmist. You don't want to say something that isn't scientifically provable, so they just say he was not excluded. But they did mention this. Only 1 in 5.5 billion people would have the same foreign DNA profile from AW's rape kit. So there are 7 billion people on the planet. It is theoretically possible that there's some 27-year-old dude in China who has the exact same DNA in his sperm as Rodney Reed. I'm doubting that. So Rodney, I mean, it's not even that I'm mad at Rodney at this point. I mean, this guy is a stupid-ass liar. He's an evil dick. What is shocking and appalling is the people around him. What is Dr. Phil doing not seeing through this bullshit? Are you telling me there's not a producer on the Dr. Phil show that doesn't know this information? They don't know he's caught red-handed raping a 12-year-old?
8-year-old.
And Dr. Phil asks him, he goes, "Hey, Rodney, why were you never convicted in those cases? Why?"
Did you ever have any kind of contact with a 12-year-old girl?
No, I don't do that stuff.
You don't do that stuff? Yeah, because you're behind bars, but you did do that stuff, which is the issue.
So why have you been accused of multiple situations of sexual violence?
I believe jealousy and anger played a lot in that. I can't tell you what goes on through a person's mind to make them say certain things.
Why were you never charged? Why were you never convicted of any of those things?
That's something that the state would have to answer. They brought that stuff in.
No, Rodney, I'll answer it. You just chill out there. You calm down. The reason you weren't convicted is because they figured out that it was your DNA after you had been found guilty and put on death row for killing Stacey Stites. You know, Rodney, you kill and rape so much, it's hard to keep track. And it seemed like, beating on a dead horse to try you for other rapes when you were already going to be put to death. But now, that fat-ass Kardashian, who, by the way, let's not forget, her father was a defense lawyer for O.J. Simpson, a guilty black man who killed white people and was set free. And Robert Kardashian had a colleague, a fellow defense lawyer for O.J., who is Barry Scheck. And Barry Scheck is the founder of the Innocence Project, who is working with Kim Kardashian, Bob Kardashian's daughter, to set other black people free who have killed white people. Have you figured out that that's a pattern? That that's not an accident? I mean, are you aware that the next high-profile case coming out of the Innocence Project or out of Kim Kardashian and Rihanna is not going to be trying to set free a Guatemalan for having killed a Samoan? Do you realize that there's a pattern here, right? Okay, good. I want to make sure you're on the same page. But the thing is, with Rodney, is that there's other stories to tell. I'm going to tell you one right now. Let's read. The rape and murder of Stites was hardly Reed's first or last foray against women. First was Connie York, a 19-year-old, ooh, he likes him at 19, who had come home late one evening after swimming with friends. York was grabbed from behind and told, "Don't scream or I'll hurt you." When York did not listen, she was repeatedly struck, dragged to her bedroom, and raped multiple times. Reed was interviewed, and while he admitted that he knew York from high school, he denied raping her, which apparently is good enough for Dr. Phil. When confronted with a search warrant for biological samples, Reed had an about face. "Yeah, I had sex with her. She wanted it." The case went to trial 4 years later, and Reed was acquitted. Now, if you think that because he was acquitted, he didn't do that, then you are naive, and you are a child, and you need to change your diapers. O.J. Simpson was acquitted, lest we forget. Next up. Oh, first, let's jump back into Francis. Let's see what he had to say.
And he's been offered a 120-day reprieve.
An innocent man is on death row. Mountains of evidence exonerates Rodney Reed.
The voice you're hearing is the white man Sean King. The video you're watching is 2p, or not 2p, but it's around there. And this could be a perfect storm of things I hate, all pressed into one and thrust before me. Now, just please listen and understand who these people are. because this is, again, a repeated behavior. This is not the last time that these same characters, and I'm talking about St. Francis, Kim Kardashian, Oprah Winfrey, Sean King, all of them, they're all going to fuck up in the exact same way, and you shouldn't be surprised the next time. But never let them live this down, because they are so wrong on Rodney Reed that it behooves us, big word, look it up, to do what they're asking us to do, which is remember his name, say his name, Rodney Reed. They think that's going to be a rallying cry for, I don't know, bleeps or some sort of statement against the justice system. No, it's going to be a reminder that there are cripplingly weak, racist human beings out there who will let a rapist and murderer free simply because they think that they are helping a bleep. As in, hey, your people have suffered in the past, but here you go, we'll set this rapist and murderer free, so we're about even now. That's the logic, the emotional logic in their brains. This Rodney Reed case is a doozy, and it's going to be around for a while. It is a flaming hot pile of dog feces, and we should rub their faces in it every time they have the stupidity and the gall to bring it up. I will arm you with the facts. Feel free to use them as you see fit.
But all of that evidence was kept from the all-white jury that convicted him.
Oh my God, look at that all-white jury, guys. Is that Heil Hitlering? I don't know about the angle of the arm, but I don't know, potential Nazis here.
I am absolutely innocent in this case. I absolutely had nothing to do with Stacey's death.
Rodney, take two. Yeah, could you do it with a little more feeling this time? That felt a little dry to me, a little hollow.
All right, so as you can see, I clearly just came from outside, or as the jokes will probably say, from a safari. But
that's not a safari hat. I mean, what kind of a gay safari is that? And why do you wear a hat inside? Francis, don't try to defend or justify your outfit. It's indefensible.
I needed to do as quick a response to this as possible because...
The world needs you, Francis. I mean, you saved a bleep. It was pretty much you.
This has been going on not just in the recent events that you've seen with countless activists, celebrities, government officials calling for this decision to be made, but this actually was a decision that was made back in 2015.
Francis, shut your spittle-faced Scottish mouth, please. Listen to me. Are you in favor of 12-year-olds being raped? Because you celebrating this man is kind of you acknowledging that you don't give a shit about 12-year-olds being raped. I mean, I'll put aside the Stacey Stites case. Rodney Reed most definitely raped and killed Stacey Stites. I mean, you'd have to be a jackass to not have the wherewithal to understand the basic, obvious facts of that case. But there is, I mean, a dozen other situations that this guy is dirty and red-handed, got caught. His semen is everywhere. I think I have a little bit in the back of my head, like right behind my ear, just took a ricochet. I got to shower just to be safe because this man is throwing ropes and no one is safe.
So it's a repeat of that. But what we are now hoping is that now, as a result of this, Texas will consider the mounting evidence, scientific and testimonies that have exonerated Rodney Reed.
The evidence...
You guys hear these words? Scientific evidence exonerated. Those were words that mean something, and he just cobbled them together, and we're supposed to think Rodney Reed is an innocent, didn't-do-nothing angel who deserves exoneration. You know why? Because evidence and scientific. Do you notice that he never explains anything? You know why? Because he can't. Francis is a special needs YouTuber.
The evidence points to the victim's fiance, Jimmy Fennell.
Oh, really? Does it, Sean? Kind of like the evidence in the Jasmine Barnes case. Remember when that little black girl got shot and you said, hey, let's find that white guy in the red truck. Remember that one? And it turned out to be two black guys that shot her? Yeah, we don't talk about it much anymore, do we?
A local police officer who has a history of violence against women.
I mean, I can't let that go. Jimmy Fennell had no history of violence against women. Rodney Reed did. So it's unbelievable he would bring up a history of violence against women and then pretend or hope that none of us know a single thing about Rodney Reed.
Now, before I get to what happens after this would not be possible. In no mean, shape or form.
In no mean shape or form? Not a phrase, Francis.
Without you, without the people. The people, as the saying goes, the people united will never be defeated. If we...
He's trying to turn this into a promo, some inspirational speech. Francis, you jackhole. You are trying to free a rapist and a murderer. I mean, do you realize that's not a minor thing? Like, hey, what'd you do today? Well, I played a little online poker, watched a football game, and tried to free a murderer? What What are you doing? All right, time out on Frances. Let's head back. Then came Lucy Eiper, who Reed met in high school and whom Reed began to date after her graduation. Eiper had 2 children with Reed, not her smartest choice. Throughout their relationship, Reed physically abused Eiper, including while she was pregnant, and raped her, quote, all the time, including one time in front of their 2 children. Okay, let's move forward. Frances, it's weird. It's almost as if you don't want to know this or you don't know this, because your silence on this is deafening. Afterwards, Reed began dating Caroline Rivas, an intellectually disabled woman. Rivas's caseworker noticed bruises on Rivas's body, and when asked about them, Rivas admitted that Reed would hurt her if she would not have sex with him. Later, Rivas's caseworker noticed that Rivas was walking oddly and sat down gingerly. Rivas admitted that Reed had, the prior evening, hit her, called her vulgar names, and anally raped her. The samples from Rivas's rape kit provided the link to Stites' murder. Oh, so when she got raped and went to the hospital and they figured out, oh, it's the sperm, it's Rodney Reed, okay. It's the same guy, it's the same sperm, it's everywhere. We continue. Shortly thereafter, and about 6 months before Stites' murder, Reed raped Vivian Harbottle underneath a train trestle as she was walking home. When she pleaded for her life for the sake of her children, Reed laughed at her. The foreign DNA from Harbottle's rape kit was compared to Reed. He could not be excluded, and only one person in 5.5 billion would be expected to have the same foreign DNA profile. So that's just another woman he raped when she was walking home.
Organize, and we activate, and we fight. Change is possible. Now, I have to, first of all, commend the efforts of the Innocence Project, who have been fighting tooth and nail to really shed light on Rodney's case and bring it to attention and take it to anyone and everyone who would listen. And they've been fighting for this for years. As I mentioned, this isn't just a recent thing. Obviously, it's brought into the spotlight by the countless celebrity mentions about Rodney Reed's case. And then a good friend of mine, Sean King, as well as Lee Merritt, the attorney who you've seen been involved in countless cases of injustice across the country.
Oh yeah, remember the guy in the Jasmine Barnes case that Sean King doxed and said, hey, this guy looks like the guy in the sketch. And he had all his people go and harass that man. That man ended up killing himself. So there's blood all over the place. These people are diabolical, and they're doing it for personal gain. They're sitting at home high-fiving. I mean, do you see Francis? He's smiling about this. God. Let me give you a little more information about that Vivian Harbottle case. Here she is. That's a picture of her. A recent photo. After he raped me, he had this look in his eyes like he wanted to kill me, says Vivian Harbottle. I begged for my life. I told him I have 3 kids. He just kept staring at me. I was crying, please don't kill me, and then he finally left. A DNA match would tell Harbottle a year and a half later, May 1997, that the man who sexually assaulted her near the railroad tracks in Bastrop was Rodney Reed, who is currently on death row for the rape and murder of Stacey Stites. I'm no angel, says Harbottle, 56, who has had 3 DWI convictions and an assault charge after a bar fight, but that man raped me. She says she decided to do her first interview about the October 1995 incident because, quote, no one is speaking up for the victims. No one is saying what a dirtbag Reed is. Everything is getting twisted around. Reed's supporters celebrated a stay of execution by the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals in February, just 10 days before his March 5th date with the lethal injection in Huntsville. Amid much controversy, claims of Reed's innocence, and charges of racism, the CCA is reviewing the case. So he was supposed to go down like years ago. Reed's defense team points to Stites' ex-boyfriend, right, yada yada yada, former Giddings police officer Jimmy Fennell as the likely perpetrator, But Harbottle says there's no doubt in her mind that Reed is guilty. 6 months after the Stites murder, he was involved in another kidnapping, or kipnapping, which is the stealing of fish, which is also a serious offense, felony in many states, and attempted sexual assault, but that victim escaped. I don't feel so bad for me, she says. I feel really bad for Stacey. If we were able to pin the Harbottle rape on Reed, she might still be alive. Harbottle was intoxicated the night she was raped, she admits. After a night of partying, well, then was it even rape? I'm not a legal expert, but I don't know. Kidding, people, I'm kidding. After a night of partying at Ray's place on Chestnut Street, where she used to work as a bartender, Harbottle started walking to her stepson's house via the railroad tracks behind the bar. Reed just came out of nowhere, she says. They sat on the tracks and talked for a few minutes, she said. But when she got up to leave, Reed threw her to the ground and raped her. He had his hand over my mouth, and then the train went by with the horn blowing, she said. No one could hear me scream. So, kind of like in space, when you're out the railroad tracks on the wrong side of the tracks with Rodney Reed, no one can hear you scream. The incident occurred about 100 yards from Reed's house, but the case went cold when Harbottle couldn't identify her attacker. She's like, they all look alike. She walked back to Ray's and called police that night in '95, but it was dark and I was drunk, she says. Police were able to draw a DNA sample, however, that's a terrible sentence. Police were able to draw a DNA sample, however, which matched with Reed after he turned himself in for a petty drug charge in April '97 and submitted DNA. It has been 20 years, and everybody keeps telling me to move on, to forget the past, she says. But how can I when the Reed case is in the news all the time? Harbottle says she's been harassed by Reed's supporters and had to report one to the police, so he would stop coming by her restaurant and grilling her about her testimony. She was called by the prosecutors during the sentencing phase of Reed's trial. 4 other former Reed rape victims also testified. I've been called a liar and a whore, she says. I've had to stay off the internet because it's just too upsetting. It's insane. Reed is still under indictment in the rapes of Harbottle and a 12-year-old girl, plus an attempted kidnapping. But he wasn't tried in those cases because he was found guilty of capital murder in the Stites case. So, the gall of people to mention, hey, if all those other cases were legit, why wasn't he convicted? He wasn't convicted because that idiot is a fucking murderer, and he already went down in flames on the Stites case. Oh, speaking of the attempted kidnapping, that was the last one, the last straw for Rodney Reed. 6 months after the Stites case, he got horny one night, and he saw a white woman. It was really late at night, and she was stopped at a gas station trying to make a phone call. And, well, why don't we let her explain to us what happened next?
The incident she described to KVUE TV reporter Chris Betts happened about 6 months after Stites' death.
I left the movie theater probably about 11:30 with a friend of mine, drove to Bastrop. I wasn't familiar with the place at all. So I saw the closest lit up gas station and I took my car to a payphone there. And while I was using the payphone through my car window, a gentleman came in front of my car and I jumped and he said, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to scare you." I was like, "That's okay." And I proceeded to use the phone through my car. And then that's when he said, "Hey, do you think you can give me a ride?" And I said, "No." And he's like, "You don't?" And I said, "Nope." And I was like, "I don't know you, I'm so sorry." And so I kept talking to whoever I was on the phone. I was like, "Somebody just asked me for a ride." And then he said, like he was on the phone with somebody else and he said, "She won't give me a ride." He's like, "I guess I'll just freeze to death." And I was just, made me feel bad. And I was only 19 at the time. So I was like, "Where do you live?" And he said, "On Main Street." And in my mind, Main Street's this big lit up road. So I was like, "Oh, well, how far?" And he said, "A mile or 2. And I was like, "Okay, I'll give you a ride." So I gave him a ride. And as soon as we get to Main Street, we took a right and started to go down the street for a while. And I said, "Well, where do you live?" Because it started to get darker. And he said, "Right over the railroad tracks." And I was like, "Okay." So we go over railroad tracks, it gets darker. And he said, "You're gonna take a left, or where the road lies, you're gonna take a left that way." And I said, "Okay." So we go down the road and he said, "You're gonna take a left down there on a dirt road." And I said, "No." I started feeling really uncomfortable. And I said, "I'm not taking my car down a dirt road." And he said, "You're not?" And I said, "No." And he's like, "Why not?" And I was like, "I'm just not taking my car down a dirt road." He said, "Well, I guess you can take me back to where the Y in the road is." And I was like, "Okay." So I take him back there and I'm feeling really uncomfortable. He starts to get out and he gets back in and he said, "Don't I get a hug?" And I said, "What?" He said, "Don't I get a hug?" I said, "I gave you a ride, don't screw me over, get out." And the next thing I know, he has me by the back of my hair, slamming my face in my steering wheel. I'm punching backwards and I open the door. I screamed so loud that I peed my pants. And I just kept punching. And we got out, started fighting a little bit. He got me by my hair and slammed me back in the car while I was in the driver's seat. So I tried to put the car in drive and push on the gas, but he got his foot on the brake. And then he took my head and he slammed it in the next seat to where I must have pulled something in my neck. It hurt really bad. And I got into the seat, kicked back into the back. Somehow I got back in the back seat and started kicking him in the face, but he still had my hair through this whole thing. Finally, we got out. We were fighting again. I don't know how we got out of the car. We fought for a little bit longer. And I asked him, I was like, "What do you want? What the hell do you want from me?" And he said, "I want a blowjob." And I said, "You'll have to kill me before you get anything from me." And he said, "I guess I have to kill you then." And so the fight was on even more. At one point, we got to where he fell right on me. And when I looked up, I looked over under the car, and I said, "A car's coming." And he got scared, and he looked that way, and he looked back at me, and he said, "Stop lying." So we kept fighting. And through this whole thing, I said, you know, if you stop right now, God will forgive you. But if you keep going, you're going to hell. And so we fought. I let him think that he had both of my hands with one of his hands, and I was in the passenger seat, he was in the driver's seat. As soon as he turned the car back around going toward the dirt road, I punched him in the face again, and then I tried to jump out. When I tried to jump out, he grabbed my hair again, so I was dragging on the ground. I told myself to get up, get up, get up, start slamming the door, his hand in the door, but it wasn't like strong enough. The door wasn't, you know, hard enough. So he got to where he put the car in park, but still had my hair. Got out, we fought some more, and we probably fought for another like 3 to 5 minutes. And finally, I had a cross on my neck. He ripped the cross off, and I was trying to get the cross at the same time, and he was dragging me by the neck to where at one point I laid down thinking I could get under the car to get away, but he stomped on my face, and I sat up. He punched me in the face, and finally he got me to where he got me in a chokehold, got me into the car, jumping up. He pulled me over the passenger seat, got into the driver's seat, and was holding my neck like this, and I was kicking with one leg. I was trying to kick the door open, and he was punching me in the side, trying to close the door, and then finally I looked in the rearview mirror, and there was lights. And it was a car. So I punched him in the face one more time, jumped out, and he stole my car.
He took it?
Yeah, took it.
What happened after that?
I was on the side of the road, and I was looking for the cross on the side of the road. And I was just on my knees looking. And a car pulled up, and it was a car full of guys. And I said, I need a ride. Somebody just tried to kill me and stole my car. And they said, well, we don't have any room. And it was a car full of African-American guys. So I was like, well, can you call the cops? And they were like, well, we'll go call the cops for you. And I said, okay. So I ran to the next house, which was a trailer, and a guy's dog was barking outside, and I screamed, and he came out, and I said, I need help. I said, somebody just tried to kill me and stole my car. And he said, well, I don't have a phone. And I said, well, can you take me to the police station? He said, my diesel takes too long to warm up. So I went to the next trailer, and it was an older couple. And so they called the cops came. And I identified who it was, exactly what he was wearing, where I picked him up, what time it was, and everything else.
Linda Schluter identified her attacker from a mugshot.
I picked him out immediately, no doubt at all.
It was a picture of Rodney Reed. A grand jury found enough evidence to indict him with intent to commit sexual assault against Schluter and for unauthorized use of her vehicle. But that case didn't go to trial because of what happened next, a DNA connection between Reed and Stacey Stites. Because not only did investigators have a mugshot, the one that Schluter had chosen, they had a DNA sample from Reed from a separate case when a woman claimed he had sexually assaulted her. Those charges against Reed are still pending.
Exactly. There's a ton of charges still pending. So that case, where he is 1,000% guilty, didn't go to trial. The 12-year-old he raped, that didn't go to trial. The drunk girl walking home from work, who he raped, that didn't go to trial. And if you want to see where this took place, let me show you. Let me get you familiar with Bastrop. So it's a small town. Here's Bastrop, Texas. Now up here is Bastrop High School, and this is where Stacey Stites' car was found. The reason this was a little bit odd, or this didn't work in favor of Rodney Reed, is because it's right next to where he lives. Rodney Reed was living at 806 Martin Luther King Drive, which is, I mean, you're not exactly living up to the ideals of Dr. King there, Rodney. So he was down here, right by the railroad tracks. It's a very good spot to be if you're a bleep, because you got KFC right there, and you got a Popeyes right down here. So it's a real Bermuda Triangle of chicken loving right there, which is very advantageous for Rodney. But sometimes Rodney would get bored, and so he'd go down to the main street. And what was the closest main street? Well, Chestnut, right there. It's a big street, got a lot of shops. In fact, you got Long Star Mart, which is a gas station, has a little mini mart. That's where he attacked the last woman you just heard. She was at Long Star Mart.
A young lady by the name of Linda was driving through Bastrop at about 3:30 in the morning on the route Stacey would drive to work, right along the railroad tracks, and she stopped at Long Star Mart to use the phone, and then a man came and talked his way into her car. That man later, along the ride, sexually propositioned her. When she said no, he informed her he was going to kill her.
You remember the drunk woman who was walking home from work? Do you know where she used to work? She used to work right there, 1308 Chestnut Street. Used to be a bar called Ray's, and she had to walk along the railroad track to get to where she was trying to go. And unfortunately for her, that was right in the kill zone where Rodney Reed would do his hunting. Now, I don't know where the 12-year-old was, but she's somewhere in Bastrop, and it really doesn't matter. I mean, his semen was in her, so he's 100% guilty on that. But I do bring up these locations to show you this. How did Stacey Stites get to work? She lived way over in Giddings, Texas, which is way the fuck over here. Well, we know the route she took, and this is the route.
We knew she had left Giddings, Texas. We knew her route was 290 to Highway 21 into Bastrop in the Loop 150. So those were the routes that we were traveling by air.
Let me show you where the HEB is. Here it is. That's the supermarket. The thing is, if you live over in Giddings, Texas, you're way over there, so it's kind of a long trip. It's about a 30-minute drive. And indeed, you do take the 290 from Giddings, and you are going to have to connect to the 21 right there. And the 21 bleeds into the 150 right here. And the 150 kind of spits you out somewhere past the KFC right here onto Chestnut Street. And Chestnut Street takes you right through here. And unfortunately, there's a railroad track right there, and the trains would come in the middle of the night sometimes. That's what the prosecutor thinks happened that night. She thinks Stacey was at that railroad crossing, and Rodney was always up and about in the middle of the night. We know Rodney fucks with women in this area, as I just showed you. That's his zone, and that's the road Stacey Stites was taking that morning. He forced his way into her car, he raped her, he drove her off into the bushes, he dumped the body, he left the car up at the high school before walking along the railroad track back home to Grandma's house. That's what Rodney Reed did that night, and I would bet, I'm not kidding, I would bet my life on it.
A location which also tied him to the crime.
Her truck was found on the railroad tracks. Well, Rodney Reed lived probably a half mile to a mile from that location.
Really spearheading the movement forward with rallies, with activation, providing phone numbers and direct call to action. That is such an important factor here on how change is actually possible, not just by using the platform or whatever voice you have, which is powerful in its own, then to have direct action items. That is the difference maker. That is the change. Sean outlined countless numbers that I and have been asking people that I know and people that follow me to go ahead and call those numbers, and nearly 30,000 calls were made to plea for the stay of execution. That's on top of nearly 3 million signatures. That's on top of bipartisan effort to really shed light on the injustice that is the conviction and the would-be execution, if it wasn't for you, of Rodney Reed. Now, what happens after this, there's still a lot of work to be done. It's still going to take a mountainous effort to exonerate the man completely and free him. But what this does offer is a chance.
Okay, so I felt no need to comment on that because it's as cringy and embarrassing as you thought it was. It's really bad. We're dealing with unadulterated evil, currently, in real time, on your watch, yours and mine. He just talked about a bipartisan effort to stay this execution. What the hell does politics have to do with this? Wait, Democrats and Republicans are both stupid as shit on this case? What are you talking about? If you want to talk about a two-group division, let's talk about the people who are savvy and moral enough to realize that Rodney Reed is an utter bastard who deserves to die, and at the very least deserves to spend the rest of his stupid-ass life in prison. He's a super predator, he's a menace to society, he's a savage thug, and now the story is beyond Rodney. It's about the people supporting Rodney, and it's about our system of media, not just mainstream, but social media, how it's being weaponized, how it's being leveraged to uplift and defend evil people like Rodney Reed. How could this be happening? It's stunning to me. Our system is broken, but I haven't given up on Texas. This man ain't free. He's never going to be exonerated, and he could still be put to death in Texas. So I have my fingers crossed, and it's still tick, 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 Rodney, because I'm not going to forget about this, and this will not be the last time you hear about it from me. I learn the lessons from history, and O.J. Simpson is not the distant past. What was it, that thing the Jews say? Never again? Yeah, never again, guys.
This is what you If you like this channel and what Devon provides for you, let him know. You can support the channel in a variety of ways. Sign up on Patreon, PayPal, or Subscribestar.